Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine 18 Tarot and Books. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. I am here with another installment of Top Tarot Trumps, a VR to Masha over at Musings by Masha, sharing my top, at the time of filming, favorite Hierophant cards. I have managed to pick 5 for Major Arcana number 5. This time, I feel like the Hierophant is one that I am probably not alone in having struggled with. Coming from a background, for folks who don't know, of having been raised Catholic and having had a pretty awful time in the context of Catholic school in particular, the kind of Pope imagery of the Hierophant in a lot of decks was definitely a barrier to entry, perhaps, when it comes to learning tarot and to connecting with the cards and finding positive meanings and neutral meanings for all of the cards. The Hierophant is definitely one of a handful that, in its most traditional depictions posed a bit of a problem for me. It doesn't now. I haven't included any here, but I do certainly work with decks and love decks that have more traditional Hierophants, like more historic Marseille decks, for example. But as a beginner for tarot, it was a card that was a problem for me for sure. The 5 Hierophants that I've picked are all quite different from each other and all, I would say, quite non-traditional. You're not going to see a Pope in this video as a favorite. That's probably not super surprising for people who watch my channel, but I'll just say that. The 5 that I picked, I think, each speak to different aspects of how I read this card now. So that's why I have chosen them. The first one I picked is from a well-known deck that I know many people love, which is the Fifth Spirit Tarot by Charlie Claire Burgess. This is the indie edition of this deck. I'm not sure whether or to what extent this particular card has changed in the mass market version. Maybe you can tell me in the comments below if this card has stayed the same in the mass market. I'll probably pick up the mass market at some point, but I haven't as of now. So this Hierophant, as you can see here, is a librarian. They're standing in front of those bookshelves there, holding the keys to the wisdom that is held there. And you can see here in the bottom a card catalog. I'm a big fan of the card catalog. And, more books there, pen, and they're wearing a earth pendant there. Lots of really nice details in this card. And I really like the idea of a librarian as a Hierophant figure, insofar as this is a Major Arcana card that, to me, reflects kinds of knowledge and wisdom that are accumulated over time. And so certainly the written word, but also, orally transmitted wisdom could be something associated with the Hierophant. There's a sense of kind of tradition or older ideas that can come from a librarian image, I think, in that they might have a archive of ancient texts in their library. I think that that's something interesting to think about. They have, the tools in front of them, and in their mind and on their desk there to navigate all of these really, diverse and disparate systems of knowledge that the books could represent. They have the ability to help others to find the kind of insight and wisdom and knowledge that they are looking for, right? The librarian is a kind of guide, in a way, to the library and all that it contains, who, in that sense can be kind of a teacher figure who can share both, where to find particular ideas, where to find particular knowledge, but also how to, learn to do that searching yourself, right? How to use that wonderful card catalog there so that you can then, navigate these systems of knowledge yourself. And so this is definitely a Hierophant card that I really quite like. The next Hierophant that I will show, and these are as usual in no particular order, is the Teacher card from the Gaian Tarot by Joanna Powell Colbert. I really like this deck. I know that it will be one that shows up at least a couple of times in this VR series. And I really like a number of things about this Teacher card as the Hierophant. I think that the Teacher is a good alternate title for the Hierophant. This is not the only deck that I've seen make this title change. I think that it draws attention to the Hierophant as a figure who transmits wisdom, and who facilitates people connecting to different kinds of knowledge. In a more kind of religious depiction of a Hierophant, you could even think of, maybe a preacher, somebody who, is teaching to the people, right? But this Teacher, I like that they are an elder. The Gaian Tarot, I think, is one of the very few decks that I've seen really do age diversity in a really kind of thorough and non-tokenized and non-arbitrary way. I really like the way that there are, from infants to elders just dispersed throughout this deck. I think it's amazing. I really like that this Teacher is not in a classroom, but they're outside. So they, are so knowledgeable, I think, in part because they have cultivated relationships with the different non-human neighbors around them, whether that's the animals here or the plants. This Teacher, perhaps has herbalism knowledge, for example, certainly knowledge of the environment that they live in, and that is knowledge that they can share with others. And through that, I think that this Teacher can teach the kind of cultivation of a connection with the environment. For me as a druid, that's where sacredness is, right? Is in the living earth and in the environment. So that for me is a tie-in to the more kind of spiritual or religious tones of the Hierophant are represented here in a way that, for me and my spiritual path and practice, feels more relevant. Someone who is teaching about the sacred wisdom that we can learn from our relationship with nature. So I really like this. And I think of this elder as sitting in front of a tree that is also an elder, which I also quite enjoy. The third Hierophant that I chose is from the Majestic Earth Tarot. And this one is called the Hierophant's Domain. And in some ways, this is maybe the most traditional of my choices, because this one is a painting of a cathedral in Pisa. And so you can see that kind of cathedral architecture, and there's people up on the top level there, and there's people inside, and there's people at the doorway. And it's called the Hierophant's Domain. And the keywords are, and I don't like keywords as a general rule, but I will share that the keywords on this card in this deck are structure, service, tradition, and doctrine, which I think are, nicely neutral. There's nothing, inherently positive or negative, I don't think, about structure, or about service, or about tradition, or about doctrine for that matter. So I like that about this one. And I like the way that in this card, the aspect that is emphasized is that this is a gathering place. This is a representation of, perhaps organized religion, perhaps tradition and traditional knowledge of various kinds, that is collective. This is not one figure as the Hierophant figure. This is kind of the domain over which the archetype of the Hierophant has an influence, right? And so when I think about kind of, spiritual paths and practices of various sorts, including my own, having a community component, having a gathering component, having components that relate to gathering in sacred spaces of various sorts, I think that this is a nice representation of that. So that is the Hierophant's domain from the majestic earth. The fourth one that I chose is perhaps the most druidic Hierophant that I could find. I knew that I would choose this. This was the one that jumped into my mind first, actually, from my collection. And that is the Spacious Tarot Hierophant that depicts the standing stones. So not Stonehenge specifically, but, the angle of the sun rising there and creating, the shadows that come from the standing stones. And I love this card. And I love this card, but, Druids love a good henge. That's definitely a thing. But the three shadows here at the bottom of the card remind me of the symbol of Awen. This divine inspiration is one way that gets translated. There's kind of three ray symbol. I have one I can show you. This is Awen here on this pendant. And this, means different things to different people, but it's definitely kind of a druid symbol. And my understanding is that this derives from Iolo Morganeg's work, but one of the ways that this is interpreted is that this is the angle of the sunrise, or the angle of a shadow cast by the rising sun at the solstices and at the equinoxes. So that as a representation of a kind of inspiration that bards and artists find from the living earth and from nature, I think is really nicely reflected in this one. And so that is a particular kind of, perhaps spiritual wisdom or divine wisdom that is creative and that also is grounded in a tradition that I'm a part of. So I really love this card, and this is also a deck that's going to appear multiple times in this series. The last one that I chose is perhaps also kind of a druid's Hierophant, if I'm honest. And again, if you know me and you know my channel, this is not a surprise. And that is the Tarot for the Great Outdoors. And the Hierophant in this one is titled Traditionally, and it shows redwood, national, and state parks. And so what a great symbol of something that's been around for a very, very, very long time. How much wisdom and knowledge do those ancient ones have from all the things that they have seen, these redwoods? And, I showed the card from the Majestic Earth showing the cathedral, but for druids, and I think many others with kind of nature-based or earth-based practices, when we think about what a sacred space looks like, what our grove space could look like, this is much closer actually to what we might picture. Maybe more in our local ecology. There are no ancient redwoods like this where I live. I've never seen one in person. I would love to. But how incredible. As a space of worship, as a space of connecting to the sacred, this grove, and also that kind of ancient aspect of the knowledge that the Hierophant carries. So that is my last of my 5 Hierophants. So the ones that I chose to recap, I chose the Librarian of the 5th Spirit Tarot. I chose the Teacher card from the Gaian Tarot. I chose the Hierophant's Domain from Majestic Earth. I chose the Standing Stones from Spacious Tarot, and the Great Redwoods from Tarot for the Great Outdoors. Those are my 5 Hierophant cards that together I think speak to how I think about this card and how it turns up in readings for me a lot of the time. If you have particular favorite Hierophants, do share in the comments. I would love to hear about them, or if you have particular ways of reading the Hierophant that are perhaps unique to you and your experience, I would love to hear about those as well. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.